also reports tonight about the Russian woman charged with trying to carry out the government influence campaign through the NRA right here in the U.S., and also about people who appear to have been her American co-conspirators. That is a big story, and we have one of the reporters who's gotten a very significant scoop about it. But we begin with something actually far more troubling than any of that. And it began last March. Let's set the scene because it is critical. Donald Trump had been in office just 6 weeks. Trump's national security advisor was already out, his attorney general, facing immense pressure. And it was on March 1st when the Washington Post exposed that Jeff Sessions participated in 2 secret encounters with the Russian ambassador during the campaign. Now, that was, to put it nicely, a ways away from Sessions' own testimony at his own confirmation hearing that he hadn't had, quote, communications with the Russians. Now, we now know that internally at the DOJ, there was already a process going of career lawyers recommending that Jeff Sessions recuse himself from the probe, that he had an obligation on that. And this was a key inflection point. Jeff Sessions could have taken the DOJ guidance to recuse. He could have also ignored it. In other words, it was a decision to make. And Donald Trump at that moment could have stayed out of it, or at least stayed out of it in the public realm. But here's what happened. The next day, March 2nd, Trump had this very big, grand appearance. He was arriving via helicopter on the USS Gerald Ford. This was the Navy's very new and quite expensive warship. Now, Trump spoke to sailors there, and then the traveling press corps, during this big, fancy appearance, was with Trump, and they put an important question to the president. So watch this key moment. This is one of those unpredictable, you could even say random times where you see this normally routine, even frustrating job of these traveling reporters. You see it become pivotal. You see it become potential criminal evidence. Because watch as these reporters ask Trump whether Jeff Sessions' potential recusal on the grounds he was too close to the Trump campaign should happen.
Mr. President, should Sessions recuse himself from investigations into your campaign in Russia?
I don't think so at all.
When did you first learn that Sessions spoke to the Russian ambassador? Did you know during the campaign?
I don't think he should do that at all.
When were you aware that he spoke to the Russian ambassador?
I wasn't aware at all.
That was a quick but pivotal moment. Trump did 2 things. He inappropriately pressured Sessions not to recuse. And then, if you listen closely, he actually contributed to the DOJ's argument for Sessions' recusal. Because the DOJ's standard for this is whether a person is too close to the subject of the probe, whether Jeff Sessions would basically be more of a Trump campaign surrogate who happened to be attorney general rather than acting as an independent law enforcement officer. Now, if Sessions didn't recuse after that statement, it would have made him look even more like he was doing Trump's bidding. And Trump apparently didn't know that making that statement would also, as just a general matter of embarrassment, make him look weak and out of the loop about a decision that was already done. Because there were reports that showed the internal DOJ process had already resulted in Sessions accepting that nonpartisan recusal recommendation from the career staff earlier that week, and that Jeff Sessions was already working with DOJ officials on writing the very rationale they would soon release to the public. In fact, it was barely an hour after Trump put that public pressure on Sessions to stay in charge of the probe, to not recuse, that Jeff Sessions stepped out to the world with a fateful announcement that would actually change the arc of this entire probe. It would enrage Trump. It would make Rod Rosenstein a new household name in every household that follows the news these days. And then what happened next is at issue, and it's in the news tonight. Donald Trump responding with a mix of, call it, personal rage and a kind of management impotence, by which I mean that he freaked out enough that a lot of people heard about it, but did not follow through to actually do the firing of Jeff Sessions that he initially demanded in his initial freakout. So there were credible sources who were able to tell both the New York Times and the Washington Post that Trump was fuming about firing Sessions, that he told his aides he wanted it done. Of course, we know he did not get it done. And that's not all. Donald Trump was apparently unaware, completely unaware, of a pretty key rule in legal recusals. I'm talking, of course, about no backsies. The DOJ doesn't recommend a legal recusal for, say, some factual reason and then just take it back. But that's actually what Trump was demanding. He told Sessions to take back the recusal from the Russia probe So in our timeline, this was now just a few days later, March 4th, and Sessions goes down to Mar-a-Lago, where, quote, the president objected to his decision to recuse himself. Mr. Trump, the New York Times reported, who had told aides that he needed a loyalist overseeing the inquiry, berated Sessions, told him he should reverse his decision, an unusual, potentially inappropriate request. Sessions refused. The confrontation being investigated by Bob Mueller, as are the president's private and public attacks on Sessions and the efforts to get him to resign. So let's take this all together. There are many people, I'm sure you know many people, who say this, that Donald Trump is somehow ignorant or clueless or dumb. You hear that from time to time. And Donald Trump may certainly be ignorant of all kinds of things, certainly the things he doesn't care about. But the evidence in this mounting case shows that he is very informed and very canny about using a whole range of tactics to get what he wants in this criminal probe. Now, here is how that is key to where this probe is heading. Donald Trump deploys both public and private means to do these things that look like evidence of obstruction of justice, and that's key to what is the disturbing news tonight. So let's go back into the timeline. Donald Trump presses Sessions, and that became part of Mueller's probe itself, because he had an interest which, quote, demonstrates Sessions' overlooked role as a key witness in the investigation into whether Trump tried to obstruct the inquiry itself. And the Times reported Mueller's investigators pressed current and former White House officials about Trump's treatment of Sessions and whether they believe the president was trying to impede the investigation by pressuring him. The Attorney General also interviewed at length by Mueller's investigators in January, and of the 4 dozen or so questions Mueller wants to ask Trump, 8 relate to Sessions. Among them, what efforts did you make to try to get him to reverse his recusal? Now, Trump's public attacks and pressure on Sessions were backed by these private efforts, which Mueller's investigating. And that's the context for what Trump did today. And while we don't usually treat Trump's tweets as news stories in and of themselves, because they're not news, they're often ploys, and some of them are just lies, this one is important. Quote, this is a terrible situation, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further. Mueller's totally conflicted. His 17 angry Democrats that are doing his dirty work are a disgrace to the USA. So what are we looking at there? We're seeing the public part. What else is Trump doing to shut down the probe in private tonight? That's a big question. You can also see how this is evidence of obstruction that concerns even Trump's own lawyers, because their argument today was, hey, no, Trump did not say what he said, that his call to stop the probe was not really a call to stop the probe, not an order. Mueller's investigators may disagree with that. They are probing how the president talks to and pressures the DOJ, and one Democrat, a former prosecutor, spoke to how this all fits into criminal intent.
Clearly, this statement is serious and substantial evidence of criminal intent, even if it doesn't constitute a crime itself. The president is coming close to actual committing the crime of obstruction of justice, if not crossing that line already. And these tweets, adding to each other, amount to evidence of criminal intent. There is now, right now, a clearly credible case of obstruction of justice against the President of the United States.
So why is this happening now? Well, there's a new report that suggests it's not just the Manafort trial, which shows what happens to the defendants who don't cooperate with Mueller, but also that Trump learned within the last day the special counsel will limit the scope of questioning and would like to ask questions both orally and written for the president to respond to. In other words, there is still serious pressure for an interview, and according to ABC News, sources familiar with the president's reaction Wednesday, that was the genesis for his early morning tweet storm. Rachel has pinpointed that a lot of important issues today require us to focus on what people do, not just what they say. The question that could determine the future of the Trump presidency tonight involves whether Trump is trying to do something with what he's saying to his attorney general and to the other DOJ and FBI officials that he's attacked, he's berated, he's undercut, and of course, who he's tried to remove from office. Remember, this is still the only American presidency to ever successfully seek the removal of the top 2 officials at the FBI, They're now both potential witnesses to obstruction. And it's the only presidency in history which is under investigation for the unsuccessful efforts to remove both an attorney general and a special prosecutor himself as the probe remains open. And that, of course, is just what we know based on what's in public and what is leaked. So one more thing, as you take it all together. There is another reason why Donald Trump may be writing things about Sessions that look self-incriminating on Twitter, that have his own lawyers saying they aren't what they are. Now, this theory again requires you to entertain the belief that the president is more canny than clueless. Donald Trump's team has good reason to have learned by now that Mueller's case uses Donald Trump's past efforts to squeeze and oust Jeff Sessions. Mueller's case may already have strong evidence of that, provable evidence. And so knowing that it looks bad, Donald Trump may want to re-up the worst parts of this himself and say, how bad can it be if it's what I just tweeted? I turn now to a reporter who has been leading much of our knowledge about this, Carol Leonnig, investigative reporter for the Washington Post, and she has a new story tonight on the new Mueller interview offer to Trump, which of course is central to all of this. Thank you so much for being here on a busy night for you.
Glad to be here, and thanks for the good questions you guys always ask. It's been a roller coaster of a day.
I think that's fair to say, and there's some theme parks that are open well into the evening, and we may still be on the roller coaster at this moment. Given your reporting, walk us through what you've learned about Mueller's counteroffer for a potential Trump interview, and why do you think he's willing to limit some questions?
I'm told that Mueller's team presented a counter-proposal in this 7-month-long negotiation over the special counsel being able to interview the president about evidence suggesting that the president obstructed justice or sought to thwart a criminal probe.